My name is Clayton Dube, and it's my immense privilege to be a part of the U.S.-China Institute here at the University of Southern California. But it's an even bigger privilege to welcome you here. Thank you all for coming to our 10th anniversary conference. So a little bit more than 10 years ago, USC had a new provost. His name was Max Nikias, and he had been the dean of the School of Engineering. And on assuming the position of provost, he determined that USC needed to do something big, something bold, something different on China. And so he assembled a group of faculty here at USC and talked with them about what was going on in the academic world on China, where were the biggest gaps, and how might USC address those. And so this committee of faculty members determined that focusing on the relationship between the United States and China was something that was desperately needed. And so I'd like to begin by first asking all of the members of the USC faculty who are here to stand, because it's partly because of them that we exist. It's also because of our students. And I'd ask our students to stand, except that it's 9 o'clock in the morning. And I realize many of them have not yet arrived. But we'll acknowledge them a little bit later. We are extremely fortunate to have students involved with the Institute from virtually all across the USC campus. Public health, medicine, other sciences, but especially in the social sciences and the arts and humanities. We're extremely fortunate to have such a wealth of students in engineering, in business, in cinema, all across this campus involved with the Institute. Now, we're able to do events like this and to produce documentaries such as we've done, and to do these kinds of things because of the amazing faculty, the terrific students, and also the long-suffering and hard-working creative staff of the U.S.-China Institute. Most of them are outside taking care of registration and other things, but ladies and gentlemen, they all deserve a round of applause. That would include Venus Jones, who has been with us every step of the way, Craig Stubing, Catherine Gao, who have been with us most of the steps in the decade that the U.S.-China Institute has existed. Now, when I was brought on board, I had an interview with the provost, and he said, you know, we're going to focus on the U.S.-China relationship because we think it matters. And I said, that's a great idea. What took you so long? And he apologized. He said, well, I've only been on the job for a few months. We're taking a big step. And the commitment of this university was exemplified that when the Institute was announced, it was part of a trustee tour of China. And the announcement of the creation of this institute actually happened in the Great Hall of the People back in 2006. Now, over this stretch of 10 years, we've sought to do one thing. We've sought to inform public discussion about the evolving nature of the U.S.-China relationship and its profound importance. We've done it through documentary films, we've done it through our publications, and of course, we've sought to do it through our training programs and especially conferences such as this. Our focus has been on substance. And that's what we're trying to give you today. We hope that you find today's conference focusing on the place of China in American politics and American policies, how those policies come into being and their importance with regard to China. We have truly amazing folks to talk with you today. Before I yield the microphone to these folks, I wanted to talk a little bit, though, about the history over this last 10 years. I hope you'll indulge me. Looking at China. And so this was an original design for a conference that we had in 2011 focusing on the Chinese economy. So in 2011, we were already exploring things going on in the Chinese economy, including demographic change, including other issues with regard to technology transfer and a lot of other sorts of things. And the notion here, of course, was the UN leading the way, looking to China. Now, people are still looking to China, obviously. And so earlier this year, we had headlines like this, that the Chinese economy was a threat to global economic stability. And this was a hangover from the trauma of the previous 6 months, which included a big stock market sell-off in China, the fall, the attempt to prop up the yuan, and other economic events. So those were recorded in The Economist and, of course, in Business Week. The notion was that China's economy now had global impact. Now, we, of course, have been aware of that. Trade with China has grown dramatically over the decades, but especially over the last 10 years. So in 2006, you can see the volume of imports in terms of goods and services from China and the volume of exports from the United States. Now, obviously, the blue columns are taller than the gold columns. China exports more to the United States. But some of you sharp-eyed folks will have detected something truly remarkable. That what? Over this period, American exports have grown at a faster rate than Chinese exports. So the trade deficit remains large, but it is narrowed. Now, one of the things that I used to joke about was that Americans were so preoccupied with doing business in China that the word guanxi, for relations, connections, had become, certainly in American business schools, an English word. Well, as of June this year, it's official. Since June of this year, guanxi became part of the Oxford English Dictionary. Not a joke anymore. Now, many Americans have focused on the fact that the Chinese state, through banks and other institutions, has purchased such a large share, large in terms of just dollar volume, of American debt. And so in 2006, just under $400 billion of American treasuries. And as of the end of last year, a bit more than $1.2 trillion. Now, this is a lot of money. But of course, even today, it's only about 6.5% to 7% of total U.S. debt. But Americans are quite preoccupied with it. So last spring, when a survey was conducted by the good folks at the Pew Research Center, they found that 89% of Americans were worried about this. They thought this represented a serious problem for the United States. most of us who pay any attention to this see it in quite the opposite terms, that it binds China and the United States together, and that it doesn't represent any sort of hazard to the United States. But 9 out of 10 Americans beg to differ. This is the year. This is the year that the first Chinese-made automobiles are going to be widely sold in the United States. Do you know what brand? Buick. Buick. So for a long time, General Motors has sold far more Buicks in China than in the United States. But beginning in June of this year, Buick, General Motors, began to import Chinese-made SUVs with the Buick name tag into the United States. In terms of sales, this is really, really trivial. But in terms of auto parts, the United States is importing a great deal of auto parts from China. And of course, this has drawn the attention of some. Let's look at perceptions. Now, those of you who read our newsletter, Talking Points, know that last week in Beverly Hills, the union that services the Beverly Hilton Hotel accused Wanda, one of China's largest companies and certainly one of its highest profile companies, of trying to buy a US election. On a corner in Beverly Hills, 2 wealthy developers are looking to develop property. One of these owns the Beverly Hilton Hotel, and the other is Wanda. And they disagree whose project should go first, whose project should be permitted at the largest level. It's an electoral measure, and already one side is playing the so-called China card. Foreigners are not allowed to contribute to American campaigns. Foreign corporations are not allowed. American subsidiaries of foreign companies are, and the Wanda local group is, of course, a subsidiary. Foreign nationals are not. And so the Hilton Hotel folks argue that these campaign contributions have been directed not from within the United States and not by Americans. They're playing the China card. Perceptions. Now, many of you know that this is our logo, how Chinese see the United States, how Americans see China. Well, the Pew folks have been carrying out these surveys for quite some time. So has Gallup. And so in 2000, when Gallup polled Americans, very few of Americans thought that China was the leading economic power in the United States. 65% said the United States was. Not showing on this was Japan, the European Union. But fast forward to 2009. By 2009, more Americans thought that China was the world's leading economic power. And by 2016, by this year, you can see that half of Americans asked what country is the leading economic power, answered China. This is a fascinating figure. But it causes me to wonder about this next statistic. Because Gallup also asked, who is going to be the world's leading economic power? And you can see that in 2009 and in 2011, most Americans thought, what? That China would be. But this year, because of all of that negative economic news out of China, more Americans said that the United States would be on the rise and that in 20 years, the United States would be the world's leading economic power. Now, why has this fluctuated? Obviously, Americans are aware of the growth pattern of China. So this is the plot for the GDP growth in China and in the United States, particularly at the time of the financial crisis, when the American economy actually shrank. China has been growing. Americans are aware of that. They purchase goods, so they're conscious of it. Now, many of you know that for more than a decade, China has been promoting a going out policy, sending its corporations to other countries. 2/3 of all Chinese investments made outside of China have gone to either North America or to Europe. The investments in Africa have gotten a lot of attention, but in terms of dollars, much more of it has gone to the developed world. And so we have these cartoons from China talking about the acquisition of foreign companies. So for example, Geely's purchase of Volvo from Ford. Now within China, there's some resentment of this policy. Companies that are primarily producing in China for export resent the encouragement given to Chinese companies to go elsewhere. And so they are critical. Now here in California, we're particularly aware of this. California has been the biggest recipient of Chinese investment. It's come in the form of hotels, it's come in the form of biotech investments, greenfield development of research facilities up in the Silicon Valley, that sort of thing, but especially in terms of property development. China's largest property developer is Vanke, and the head of that company, Wang Shi. When he announced the building of these $600 million condos in San Francisco, what did he say? I'm following my customers. My customers have gone to America. I sell to them in Beijing. I sell to them in Shanghai. I'll sell to them in San Francisco. Now, when Figueroa is not gridlocked, in just a couple minutes, you can get from USC up to this development opposite Staples Center. Better than $1 billion is being invested by this Beijing company, Oceanwide. A little bit farther up the street, the Greenland project, Metropolis, which is right next to the freeway, and those of you who spent an hour or so on the freeway coming here, perhaps you saw that. This is spectacular, this kind of investment. Last year, $16 billion was invested by Chinese corporations in the United States. But individual Chinese invested about twice that much in single-family homes, in condos that they purchased. Almost $30 billion. We, of course, are aware of it in California. We have a lot of companies seeking to sell to those Chinese buyers. Some of them might work a little harder at their name choice. I'm not sure that Great Leap Forward Investments resonates very well with Chinese who know anything about their history. Chinese get rich in real estate in California. Of course, everybody involved in the academic game is aware of the hundreds of thousands of Chinese who have come to the United States to study. The first Chinese from the People's Republic coming to America came in 1978. They could have fit in just one part of one airplane, 48. 2 of them came here to USC. Today, more than 335,000 are studying in institutions of higher learning. Close to 400,000 are studying here if you include high schools and elementary schools. The flood is immense. At USC, we have more than 4,000 students from China, better than 11 or 12% of our total student population. And many of these students, of course, want to remain in the United States. Some Chinese companies have figured this out. They want to attract Chinese talent educated in America, but much of this talent wants to remain in America. Breathe air here, send their kids to American schools. Huawei is one of these companies. So in June, I went on the website. I wasn't really looking for a job, but I just wanted to see what Huawei had for offer. They had 454 openings in the United States. Smart Chinese companies are now collecting talent here in the United States. Now, Hollywood, this is LA, this is USC, center of the film industry here in the United States. Of course, there's been a preoccupation with the China market. And this is not new. When Henry Kissinger made that secret journey from Pakistan to China, once it was announced in July that Nixon would be going in 1972, Hollywood was on it. Former press secretary for LBJ wrote a letter to Kissinger saying, I want to be on the next plane with you, and I can bring some American stars. This is the transcript of that conversation. And of course, eventually Hollywood got to China. This is over just the last decade, the growth of the Chinese film market. The North American film market remaining fairly flat, Chinese film market sweeping up. Some question as to what direction that growth might take in the near future. And so we had, of course, Wanda purchase the largest American theater chain, AMC. And more recently, Wanda purchased Legendary Pictures, not for small coin, $3.5 billion. And of course, Legendary has made some films that some of you may have seen. Here's a list of some of them. This is probably impossible for anybody to read, but at the very bottom, they're promoting this film, Warcraft, and then it says, in June 2016, two worlds will collide.
How would you feel if a communist government like China tried to buy the New York Times or ABC News? We assume the United States would never allow that, and yet Chinese companies are buying up American film studios and movie theaters at an alarming rate. In 2012, the Chinese firm Dalian Wanda, whose founder and chairman has strong ties to the Chinese Communist Party, bought AMC Entertainment. AMC then turned around and reached a purchase agreement with Carmike Cinemas. If the deal closes, it would form the country's largest chain with more than 8,000 movie screens.
Subtle. I don't know, probably more people have seen the Hulk in this little clip than actually went to see the movie. But we have that. This is Rick Berman's advertising machine. And the name of his website, you'll see in just a moment. But first he began with some op-eds complaining about these purchases and what this represented. China is dictating terms to Hollywood. Cineplex, silence, enjoy the show. Well, the name of the website has, it's a catchy title. He's an advertising genius. China owns us. And it's set up so that you can type in your zip code and find a Chinese-owned cinema near you. His message, of course, is that this represents a threat. And we have one of the foremost experts on this subject who will be talking with us in just a little bit later today, our colleague Stanley Rosen. But China, of course, has become quite adept at messaging as well. And so, in case you were wondering how the American political system works, they've produced a video.
Help! When I grow up, I want to be the president. This is the dream of many kids around the world. However, the path towards achieving this dream can be vastly different from country to country. Anyone born on American soil, have lived in the States for more than 14 years, and are now over 35 years old, then you can run for U.S. President. Sounds easy, but pulling it off is a super complex business. You need to first set up a team and choose your running mate, then deliver speeches, fight through debates, and raise funds wherever you can, and beat all your opponents to finally sit in the Oval Office. The whole deal lasts for over 1 year. Without a glib tongue, extraordinary stamina, and most importantly, an unending flow of greenbacks, no one can ever pull through it. The two candidates in the 2012 U.S. presidential election spent $2.04 billion US. Alas, becoming a political hero is definitely far more difficult than becoming an American Idol.
I know that you'd probably like the complete lecture, but we'll have to move along. The video goes on to explain how somebody becomes the Prime Minister of Britain, and then devotes the last section to the more meritocratic method by which China selects its leaders, how China's leaders advance. Well, those of you who have followed us for some time know that we have followed China in American elections for quite a while. In 2008, we made a documentary, Election 08 and the Challenge of China, interviewing policymakers for the two sides and others to find out what those big questions were. We've also monitored China in campaign commercials. And so this is something we spent a lot of time on in 2010, in 2012, 2014. And if you'd like to see those commercials, we have them at our website. Some of them quite polished, all of them quite numerous. In this election cycle, not so much. China has not appeared in quite the same way. In 2010, there were more than 6 candidates using these commercials. And in 2012, it was an important part at the national level in the battle between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. Some of you may remember that at this time 4 years ago, there were campaign commercials where Romney said that under Obama, Jeep was leaving America and going to China, and Obama pointed out that companies that Romney had invested in had outsourced production to China. It was bitter, it was ugly. We'll have to wait and see what the last month of the election has to hold. One place, here in California, we tend not to see any of this. This, of course, is one of the bluest corners of one of the bluest states. So not much attention is paid to us on these particular issues. But if you live in Ohio, it's a different story. And so here, 2 campaign commercials from the candidates running for Senate in Ohio.
Bad trade deals that cost 3 million jobs. Many are calling Portman the best senator China ever had.
Now, the campaign against Portman by Strickland actually put out a press release. They were especially proud of this 6-second commercial because they had paid they had paid YouTube, a Google-owned company, to run it before other videos, and you couldn't skip past it. And that was the aspect of it that they were proudest of, that they were compelling YouTube watchers to see this. And you'll see that they identify Portman as a Republican from China. Not the usual designation. Another ad.
Harry Reid and his out-of-state, big-money super PAC know that Ted Strickland has a terrible record on China and jobs. So they are shamefully spending millions to attack Rob Portman to distract you from the truth. As governor, Ted Strickland lost more than 350,000 jobs, and Ohio's unemployment rate soared to a 25-year high. In Washington, Strickland supported giving most favored trade status to China, and Strickland voted against enforcing our trade laws when China cheats. Don't believe the dishonesty from Ted Strickland and his D.C. allies. Rob Portman's fighting back against China when they cheat, leveling the playing field on trade so Ohio workers can compete and win. Rob Portman has the backs of Ohio workers.
The China card. We will find it all around over the next month. Various organizations will be putting forward maps about jobs lost to China. Other organizations will put forward maps about exports and jobs created through connections to China. And so today, we want to talk about the place of China in our politics. And before we go to our first panel, I just wanted to share with you this discovery. A new little red book, quotations from Chairman Trump. I never attacked him on his look, and believe me, there's plenty of subject matter right there. It's one of the things that you'll want to commit to memory. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience as we wait for the traffic to clear. Our first speaker has arrived, and so it's my great privilege to invite our first panel up. And so let me ask everybody to come up, and we'll get started and hopefully be able to make up some time.